Imagine, if you will, a figure who represents the absolute pinnacle of chaos.
Okay.
I want you to close your eyes and, picture the ultimate cultural bogeyman of the late 20th century. We are talking about the poster child for anarchy. A man whose face was, well, is practically banned by the British establishment in the 1970s.
I have a very specific image in mind already.
I bet you do. A man whose rotting green teeth became a symbol of a whole generation's rage. You're picturing him, right? The sneer, the safety pins, the absolute refusal to conform to anything.
Absolutely. It's grainy, black and white footage. It's almost always accompanied by these screaming tabloid headlines about the end of civilization as we know it. He's the villain in the grand narrative of recent British history.
Right. The villain, the monster. Now, I want you to take that image, that snarling, spitting monster, and try to reconcile it with this next one.
Go on.
A devoted husband of 44 years. A nature enthusiast who gets genuinely, almost giddily excited about sharks and bugs. And this is where it gets really interesting. A man who financed the reunion of his avant-garde band by starring in a television commercial selling British butter.
That is quite the juxtaposition. It just sounds like a glitch in the simulation, Those two people should not be able to occupy the same body.
But they do. And that is the mystery we're hoping to solve today. We are unpacking the life of John Lydon, famously known to the world, of course, as Johnny Rotten, the frontman of the Sex Pistols and Public Image Ltd, PL.
And I think the mission of this deep dive is precisely that. It's to dismantle that paradox. We really need to move beyond the caricature, the safety pin, the spitting, the headlines, and try to get to the intellectual, complex, and frankly, deeply contradictory human being underneath it all. Because if you only know Johnny Rotten, you actually don't know John Lydon at all. And for this, we have a wealth of source material. We're pulling from his autobiography, his discography, countless interviews, and his political evolution right up to 2026.
Exactly. And for you listening, whether you're a diehard punk fan or maybe someone who just knows the name Johnny Rotten as a piece of trivia, this matters.
Yeah.
It matters because this is not just a rock biography. It's a study in identity construction.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the massive difference between the image the media sells us and the reality of a person. It's about how a working-class kid from London reshaped popular culture, not by trying to fit in, but by aggressively refusing to.
It creates a fascinating blueprint for how to survive in the public eye. You become the monster they fear so you can protect the person you actually are. It's almost a form of camouflage, isn't it? If everyone is looking at the safety pin, nobody's looking at your soul.
So let's go back. Let's go back to the very beginning. To understand Rotten, we have to understand the crucible that forged him. We'll go back to London, 1956. John Joseph Lydon is born. And we need to be really clear about the setting here. This isn't the swinging London of, Austin Powers or the Beatles in tailored suits.
Not at all. That's the exported image of the 60s, the tourist version. Lydon was born into a very specific, a very gritty reality. He was born in Holloway, North London, to working-class Irish immigrants. They lived in a two-room Victorian flat.
And when we say two-room flat, we're not talking about some minimalist studio apartment that you'd see on a design blog today. We are talking about genuine grinding poverty.
Exactly. We are talking about an outside toilet. Just imagine that in a London winter. We are talking about living right next to the Arsenal football stadium, so your entire life is punctuated by the roar of crowds and the chaos of match days. It was cramped, it was loud, and it was tough.
And then there's the cultural isolation on top of all of that. Lydon has spoken so much about this Irish Londoner experience, it really sounds like he was trapped between two worlds from the moment he was born.
He was. And this is so crucial to his entire worldview. In London, in the 1950s and 60s, anti-Irish sentiment was visceral. It was everywhere. You still saw signs in windows that literally said, "No Irish, no blacks, no dogs."
Wow.
Lydon was treated as Irish scum by his English neighbors. He talks about having bricks thrown at him just for being who he was. He was the outsider, the invader in the city he was born in.
But then, and this is the really cruel twist, every summer he'd go back to County Cork in Ireland to visit family. You'd think that would be a sanctuary, a relief.
You would think, but it wasn't. In Cork, he was mocked for his English accent. To the Irish kids, he was a plastic patty, he was a Brit. So you have a child who learns very, very early on that he doesn't belong anywhere.
He just couldn't win.
Oh.
He's too Irish for the English, and he's too English for the Irish.
Precisely. And that creates a very specific psychological profile. He later said, "I view myself as British first and foremost. I'm proper London working class." But that experience of being rejected by both sides of his own heritage, that has to be the seed of his anti-establishment stance.
It makes perfect sense.
I mean, if you don't belong to any tribe, you stop trying to please the tribe. You just become a tribe of one.
Even as that quote about it, something like, "We were the Irish scum, but it's fun being scum too."
Yeah.
That's just such a Lydon perspective, isn't it? Taking the insult, the slur, and wearing it like a badge of honor, like armor. Oh, you think I'm scum? Fine. I'll be the best scum you've ever seen.
It's a classic defense mechanism. But there was something else that happened in his childhood, something much more physical that I think really created the persona that we know. We have to stop here and really dig into this meningitis episode because I think just saying illness is too soft a word for what actually happened to him.
No, we're talking about age 7. This isn't just a fever or a bad flu season. This is a life-altering event.
No, it's a biological catastrophe. He contracted spinal meningitis, he went into a coma, and the consequences were just severe. He spent a full year in the hospital, a full year. But the most terrifying part, the part that sounds like something out of a horror film, is what happened when he woke up.
Memory loss.
Total erasure. The hard drive was completely wiped clean. He woke up and had no idea who he was. He didn't know his name. He didn't know what a mom or a dad even was. And that profound memory loss lasted for 4 years.
4 years. Can you even imagine that? Being 7 years old, essentially an orphan inside your own life. He talks about his parents visiting him in the hospital, this working-class Irish couple, probably terrified out of their minds. And he looks at them and feels nothing.
Worse than nothing. He felt suspicious of them. He describes this profound sense of guilt because he saw these adults crying over him, and he knew on some level he was supposed to know them, but they were complete strangers. He actually thought they were part of some conspiracy to hurt him.
Because of the treatment, right. I mean, the medical procedures in the early 60s weren't exactly gentle.
They were brutal. To treat meningitis back then, they had to draw fluid from the spine, lumbar punctures, with these huge needles, often with little to no sedation for a child.
Oh, God.
The nurses would have to hold him down. So in his 7-year-old mind, the hospital wasn't a place of healing. It was a torture chamber. And he thought these two strangers, his parents, were the ones allowing it to happen to him.
So you have a child who learns, at age 7, that the world is fundamentally a place of pain, that adults are not to be trusted, and that you are completely and utterly alone inside your own head.
And that right there is the birth of the Lydon stare. You know, the one, it's intense, it's unblinking, it's slightly manic.
I always just assumed that was a performance choice. Like he was trying to look psychotic for the cameras to build the Johnny Rotten brand.
Not initially, no. It was a direct medical result of the meningitis. His eyesight was severely damaged. In order for him to focus on anything, he had to lock his eyes and physically tilt his head back just to see straight.
That's incredible. It's so ironic, isn't it? That hateful stare that terrified the British establishment in 1977 was actually just a little boy trying to focus his eyes.
But he weaponized it. And this is the key insight, I think, for anyone listening. Lydon realized that this quote-unquote defect scared people. It made them deeply uncomfortable. And instead of trying to hide it or look normal, he leaned into it. He realized, if I look at you like this, you back down. It was his first real lesson in the power of intimidation.
It's survival 101. If you look like a monster, people think twice about trying to hurt you.
And he had to reconstruct his entire personality from scratch. He said he spent those 4 years of memory loss just watching people, observing. He became a voyeur of human behavior because he didn't have a personality of his own. He was just mimicking what he thought a person was supposed to be.
Which would explain why he was such a good, or at least such a compelling frontman later. He was a performance artist from age 7 because he literally had to be. But once he recovered, or at least once he relearned who he was, he had to go back into the real world. He went to St. William of York Roman Catholic School.
And if you know anything about working-class Catholic schools in 1960s London, you know it wasn't exactly a Montessori. By his own account, it was a brutal, brutal environment. He was bullied by the other students. He was caned by the teachers. It was all about conformity.
But then, at around 14 or 15, something just snapped. He decided he wasn't going to take it anymore. He saw the teachers as trying to force everyone into the same mold, and he broke the mold.
The rebellion started with his appearance. And this is a classic teenage moment, but Lydon, as he always does, took it to the absolute extreme. His father, who was a traditional, tough, working-class man, hated Lydon's long hair. He told him to get it cut.
Get a proper haircut, right?
Yeah.
The classic dad line.
Exactly. So Lydon obeyed the letter of the law, but absolutely not the spirit. He cut it, but then he went and dyed what was left of it bright green.
That is the ultimate passive-aggressive compliance of a teenager, but just turned up to 11. And it had real-world consequences, didn't it? He got a job at a children's play center teaching woodwork.
Which, frankly, sounds dangerous enough given his general disposition.
Right. But he was fired.
And he wasn't fired for being bad at woodwork. He was fired because the parents complained about the weird guy with the green hair.
It just reinforces that lesson he was already learning his whole life. Society judges you on the surface. If you look different, you are immediately treated as a threat.
And eventually that lack of care for social norms, for what people thought, extended to his personal hygiene, which brings us to the name that defined a decade. Johnny Rotten. It wasn't some marketing brainstorming session.
It was entirely literal, which is almost funnier. In the mid-70s, his oral hygiene was so poor that his teeth had actually started to turn green.
Green hair, green teeth, a very monochromatic look. Steve Jones, the Sex Pistols guitarist, saw him one day and just said, "You're rotten, you are." And the name just stuck. It wasn't a character he created. It was a description of his physical state at that moment.
So you have this green-toothed, green-haired, spinal-curved, intense-staring survivor walking around London. It's 1975. He's hanging around Malcolm McLaren and Vivienne Westwood's infamous shop, Sex. And this is where history pivots on a dime.
The audition process for the Sex Pistols is one of the great myths of rock and roll, but the reality is just as good as the legend, maybe even better. Malcolm McLaren had just come back from managing the New York Dolls. He was looking for a look, an attitude. He was not looking for a trained vocalist.
No.
He wanted a sculpture, something he could put on a stage to upset people.
And Lydon walks in, and he's wearing a Pink Floyd t-shirt. But we have to explain the significance of that shirt. Why Pink Floyd specifically?
To us today, Pink Floyd is just classic rock. Everyone's dad has a copy of Dark Side of the Moon. But in 1975, they were the absolute monarchs of the music industry. They represented everything that punk was about to rebel against.
Like what? What did they symbolize?
Technical perfection. Huge budgets, 20-minute guitar solos, massive stadium spectacles with flying pigs. They were the establishment. They were corporate rock.
So Lydon takes this shirt, this symbol of corporate rock, and he modifies it. He scratches out the eyes of the band members on the shirt and then writes, "I hate" in felt-tip pen right above the logo.
That t-shirt is a manifesto in and of itself. It wasn't just, "I don't like this band." It was, "I hate the entire idea of this band." He was rejecting the notion that music had to be professional or polished or expensive. It was a declaration of war on competence itself.
So McLaren sees this walking manifesto and asks him to audition. And what does Lydon do? He sings along to the jukebox.
He sings along to Alice Cooper's "I'm 18." But he doesn't sing it like a singer. He writhes, he spasms, he screams. He wasn't trying to hit the notes. He was like exorcising demons right there in the shop.
And the other guys in the band?
The other guys in the band, Steve Jones, Paul Cook, they were actually horrified. They were rock and roll guys at heart. They wanted to be the next Rolling Stones. They looked at Lydon and just thought, this guy is a complete lunatic.
But that tension is the magic, isn't it? The friction between a band wanting to be a traditional rock band and the singer wanting to be a living piece of performance art.
Precisely. That friction is what made the Pistols sound the way they did. The band is playing these chugging, almost Chuck Berry-style riffs, and Lydon is just wailing over the top of it, sounding like a bag of cats being thrown down a flight of stairs. It shouldn't work at all.
But it did.
It did, because it sounded exactly like London felt in 1976.
We have to paint that picture of London. The winter of discontent was looming on the horizon.
It was grim. It was really grim. High unemployment, especially for young people. Trash was piling up on the streets because of constant strikes. There was the 3-day week where electricity was rationed to save coal. The entire country felt like it was dying.
And here comes this band screaming, "No future!"
Yeah.
It wasn't just nihilism for the sake of it. It was like they were reporting the news from the streets.
It was social realism set to 3 chords.
So they release Anarchy in the UK and then God Save the Queen. And the reaction wasn't just bad reviews in the music papers. It was, as one commentator perfectly described it, pop-based moral pandemonium.
It is so hard for us to understand now, in an age where everything is shocking and therefore nothing is shocking, just how visceral the reaction was in 1977. This was the year of the Queen's Silver Jubilee.
Right.
The country was desperately trying to wrap itself in the flag and celebrate the monarchy to feel good about itself again. And here comes this band screaming, "God save the Queen, she ain't no human being."
It was seen as treasonous.
Yeah.
Genuinely. And it wasn't just newspapers writing angry op-eds. It was physical violence. Lydon and his producers were attacked with razors outside a pub in Highbury. They were targeted.
That's such a key point. This wasn't a marketing stunt for Lydon. It was physically dangerous to be him. He had that great line, "Turn the other cheek too often and you get a razor through it." He became public enemy #1 overnight.
But inside the band, it wasn't exactly a brotherhood of revolutionaries fighting the system together. There was serious tension from the start.
Oh, massive tension. Lydon had a huge conflict with the original bassist, Glenn Matlock. Lydon felt Matlock was too middle class and, ironically, considering the Pink Floyd t-shirt, too obsessed with the Beatles.
Matlock could write a tune.
Matlock was a musician. Lydon was a force of nature. They were coming from completely different places.
So Matlock leaves, or is pushed out, depending on who you ask, and in comes Lydon's old school friend, Simon John Ritchie. But we know him better as Sid Vicious.
A name that, surprisingly and hilariously, came from Lydon's parents' pet hamster.
Wait, you're kidding me. The most dangerous man in punk, the symbol of heroin chic and nihilistic destruction, was named after a hamster.
Indeed. The hamster, named Sid, apparently bit Lydon's father, who exclaimed, "Sid is really vicious," and the name was born.
That's amazing.
But bringing Sid into the band was the beginning of the end. Lydon essentially mentored Sid in the beginning. He gave him his first punk haircut, which involved literally hacking chunks out of his hair with no shape or logic. He taught him the attitude.
But while Lydon was, playing a role, he was intelligent, he was reading, he knew when to turn the Rolton persona on and off. Sid didn't have that switch.
That is the absolute tragedy of it all. Sid started to live the caricature. He believed the headlines. Lydon watched his friend just completely decline into heroin addiction and that chaotic, doomed relationship with Nancy Spungen.
Right.
Lydon wasn't celebrating that chaos. He was actually the one trying to hold it all together, which is so contrary to the public image. He was the moral compass, as strange as that sounds. He was constantly trying to get Sid off the drugs. He tried to manage the madness.
That brings us to the final collapse. The Winterland concert in San Francisco, January 1978. The band is falling apart at the seams. Sid is a mess. And Lydon closes the show with that immortal final line.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated? It was a question directed at the audience, of course, but you have to feel it was also directed at himself. He realized the Sex Pistols had become exactly what they set out to destroy. A circus, a product, a joke. They were just another rock band being sold to the masses.
And here is the ultimate proof that Lydon had a moral line he would not cross. After the band broke up, the rest of them, McLaren's idea, was to go to Brazil to record with Ronnie Biggs.
And for those who don't know, Ronnie Biggs was a famous British train robber who was on the run, a fugitive living in Brazil. The other Sex Pistols and McLaren saw him as this cool outlaw figure, a rebel.
You think an anarchist would love a train robber. It fits the brand.
But Lydon refused to go. He saw Biggs as a common criminal who had stolen working-class money from a mail train and, crucially, had violently hurt a train driver during the robbery. Lydon refused to glorify him. He said something like, "I don't dip my toe in the slurry of criminality."
That is a fascinating distinction to make. He's happy to insult the Queen, the head of state, but he won't cozy up to a guy who hurt a working-class train driver. It violates his sense of class solidarity.
Exactly. It shows a consistent internal logic that the media completely missed. They just saw chaos. Lydon saw kind of integrity.
So the Pistols implode. Lydon is done with rock and roll. He's broke, by the way. He didn't walk away a millionaire. The management took most of the money. He could have just faded away. But instead, he pivots. And he pivots hard. He forms Public Image Ltd, or PL.
And this is where he really earns his stripes as a true artist, I think. If the Pistols were about destroying the past, PL is about building a strange and unnerving future. He moved completely away from the three-chord thrash of punk.
Can you describe the sound? Because it must have been shocking to the fans who just wanted Anarchy in the UK Part 2.
Oh, it was a total rejection of that. It was dub. It was heavily influenced by Jamaican reggae. It was bass-heavy, slow, deep. It was music that vibrated your chest. The guitar wasn't playing riffs. It was making these metallic sheets of noise. It was open, it was spacious, and it was terrifying in a completely different, more psychological way.
The tracks are darker, they're more complex. The song Death Disco is about watching his mother die of cancer. That's a heavy, heavy topic for a pop song.
And he sings it with such raw anguish. Public Image, their debut single, is a direct takedown of his own media persona. He's singing, "You never listened to a word that I said, you only saw me for the clothes that I wore." He's critiquing his own audience for only caring about the image. He's deconstructing his own myth from day one.
But there is one collaboration from this era that just blows my mind. 1984, World Destruction.
Yes, a collaboration with the one and only Africa Bambaataa.
This is years before Run DMC and Aerosmith did Walk This Way. Lydon and Bambaataa basically invented rap rock on the spot.
And they recorded it in 4.5 hours. It just shows Lydon's incredible musical curiosity. He was never a punk purist. He was a sound explorer. He loved reggae, he loved dub, and he respected what was happening in the early days of hip-hop. He saw the connection between the punk rebellion in London and the hip-hop rebellion in the Bronx.
So PLL has this long, critically acclaimed run, then a hiatus in 1993. But then in 2009, Lydon decides to reform the band. But there's a pretty big problem.
A financial one?
No record label, no funding. So how does the godfather of punk, the anti-establishment icon, pay for his band's reunion?
This is the moment that broke the brains of music critics everywhere. He stars in a series of British TV commercials for Country Life Butter.
Okay, we have to talk about the elephant in the room, or rather, the cow in the room. I have seen this ad. He's dressed in tweed, running around a field of cows, being very cheeky and saying, "It's not about Great Britain, it's about great butter." It is absolutely surreal.
The backlash was nuclear. It was immediate. You had old punks claiming they were burning their records. The Guardian wrote endless think pieces about the death of integrity. Johnny Rotten is a shill for Big Dairy. He's gone soft.
But was he? Or was this actually the most punk rock thing he could have possibly done in 2009?
That's the provocative question, isn't it? Let's just look at the financials for a second. Pael had been dead for 17 years. Lydon wanted to tour. He wanted to record new music. But the record labels wouldn't touch him. He was seen as too difficult, too old, too commercially risky.
So he was being creatively silenced by the industry.
Exactly. He was being censored by capitalism. So he decides to exploit the system to defeat the system. He takes the butter money, and it was a massive check. And he doesn't go buy a mansion in Malibu. He doesn't buy a fleet of Ferraris.
He buys a tour bus.
He reforms the band. He hires the musicians he wants on his own terms. He books the studios. He records and releases the album. This is Pael on his own independent label, funded entirely by himself.
So the butter company essentially became his patron. It's like the Medici's funding Michelangelo, except it's salted dairy funding post-punk noise.
And he was completely transparent about it. He went on TV and said, "I want to make music. They offered me the money. I'm spending it on the music." There's a strange purity to that transaction that I find fascinating. He called it an anarcho-capitalist move. He found a loophole.
It really challenges our simplistic definition of selling out. Is it selling out if you use the corporation's money to make exactly the art you want to make without any compromise whatsoever?
I would argue that not doing the ad and staying silent would have been the bigger sellout. He would have sold out his creativity for the sake of preserving his cool image from 1977. Instead, he sacrificed the image to save the art.
And it really launched this whole second phase of his career where he became this ubiquitous media personality. And not just the butter ads. He started appearing on reality TV.
Oh, the list is amazing. It starts with Judge Judy in 1997.
Wait, the anarchist was on Judge Judy. How did that happen?
He appeared as a defendant. His former drummer from a post-pill project was suing him, and he won the case. He was articulate, he was sharp, and he completely dominated the courtroom. He treated the court with respect, but he absolutely refused to be bullied by the process. It's an incredible watch.
And then there's I'm a Celebrity. Get me out of here. In 2004. This is a show where celebrities live in the Australian jungle and eat bugs for public amusement.
And true to form, on the very first night, he called the audience fucking cunts on live television for voting for him to do a challenge.
Classic Lydon. The establishment must have had a meltdown.
But here's the funny thing. The complaints were surprisingly low. Only 91 complaints to the regulator. People loved him on the show. He was charming. He was surprisingly helpful around the camp. He eventually walked off the show, but he proved he could still shock while being weirdly likable.
Then he pivoted to nature shows.
Yes. Megabugs, Goes Ape, Shark Attack.
Why nature shows? That seems so wholesome. So out of character.
He's an enthusiast. He described himself not as an expert, but as someone who just loves learning. And you can see it. It humanized him. You see him getting genuinely excited about a spider, and you forget he's supposed to be this terrifying anarchist figure. It goes all the way back to his childhood curiosity, I think, the kid who had to relearn the world by observing it.
And then the ultimate surreal moment. The Masked Singer. He did it in the U.S. in 2021 as Jester, and then in the U.K. in 2026 as Yak.
A yak.
A yak. Why? Why?
I think partially for the money, which he's always open about, partially to keep his name out there so Peel can tour. But also I think he genuinely enjoys the sheer absurdity of it. It's performance art. You want to put Johnny Rotten in a giant yak costume and have him sing Help Yourself? Fine. I'll be the best damn yak you've ever seen. It's a mockery of celebrity culture by participating in its most ridiculous form.
It certainly keeps people guessing. But let's shift gears now to something a bit heavier. His politics. Because if you think you know John Lydon's politics, I guarantee you probably don't. And this is where people get really frustrated with him.
This is where the paradox gets really sharp and uncomfortable for a lot of people. Everyone assumes, because of anarchy in the UK, that he is some kind of hard-left anarchist.
But he explicitly rejects that label.
Repeatedly, and for decades. He calls anarchy mind games for the middle class. He says if you remove the police and all structure, the weak just get eaten by the strong. It's not a utopia. He views himself as a pacifist by nature, and has even said he admires Gandhi.
Which is not what you expect. And then came the American citizenship in 2013.
Yes, he became a U.S. citizen, and the reason he gave was that he believed in Barack Obama. Specifically, he believed in Obamacare. He saw the potential for a healthcare system that cared for the working class and the sick. You have to remember his own childhood experience with the NHS. He wanted that for America.
Okay, so he's an Obama supporter, case closed, he's a liberal. But wait. Then comes 2016.
And the shift to Donald Trump, this confused and enraged a lot of people. Lydon started wearing a Make America Great Again shirt in interviews.
How do you possibly reconcile Obama and Trump? They are polar opposites on almost every issue.
To Lydon, they aren't that different in one very specific way. Disruption. He saw Trump as the Sex Pistol of politics. He called him a cat amongst the pigeons. He felt the political establishment on both the left and the right was stagnant and needed shaking up. He didn't necessarily align with every single policy, but he loved the disruption. He loved the chaos Trump caused in the system.
It's the brick through the window again, just on a geopolitical scale.
Exactly. And he claimed that the left-wing media had become the new establishment and didn't understand the working class anymore. And we saw the exact same pattern with Brexit in the UK.
Oh, right, the famous flip-flop on that.
Initially, he supported Remain. In interviews before the vote, he called leaving the EU insane and suicidal. But then, after the vote, he switched. He started supporting Brexit and even praising figures like Nigel Farage.
Why the change?
Because he felt the working class had spoken and that the elites in London were trying to ignore the result or shame the voters. As a self-identified working-class Londoner, he felt he had to stand with the voters, even if he had initially disagreed with the idea itself.
So it seems his loyalty isn't to a consistent ideology, but to a class identity. Whatever the working class is doing, I'm with them, even if it completely contradicts what he said 5 minutes ago.
And he's impartial in his controversial stances. It's not just about left or right. Take Israel. He played Tel Aviv with Powell despite huge pressure from the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement from artists like Elvis Costello.
His argument there was interesting, though. He said he won't boycott a country unless he can see an Arab or a Muslim country nearby with a functioning democracy. He claims he plays for the people, not for the government.
Which is a consistent stance for him. You have to give him that. He hates institutions, but he seems to connect with individuals. But the most significant political moment of his career, in my opinion, wasn't about voting or borders at all. It was about Jimmy Savile.
This is such a chilling story. For our international listeners, Jimmy Savile was a beloved British TV personality for decades, a knight of the realm, a national treasure who raised millions for charity.
But in 1978, decades before the truth finally came out after his death, Lydon went on BBC Radio and said something truly shocking.
What does he say?
He was being interviewed, and he just went completely off script. He said, "I'd like to kill Jimmy Savile. I think he's a hypocrite. I bet he's into all kinds of seediness. I know some rumors."
Aye.
He basically tried to out him as a child abuser on national radio.
In 1978. And what did the BBC, his employer, do?
They cut him off immediately. They edited it out of the broadcast replay. And according to Lydon, they effectively blacklisted him for years after that. He was right. He tried to warn the public about the monster in their midst, and he was the one who was silenced for it.
That one incident really cements his role as the uncomfortable truth teller, doesn't it? He was the rotten one, the foul-mouthed yob, yet he was the only one willing to point out the actual rot hidden deep inside the establishment.
It forces you to reevaluate his entire career. Was he just being difficult and contrary for the sake of it, or was he seeing things that other people refuse to acknowledge? He has a moral compass. It just doesn't point north like everyone else's.
That brings us to the final and maybe most important piece of the puzzle. The man behind the stare. The personal life. We've talked about the anger, the politics, the butter. But at home, John Lydon was a deeply devoted partner.
This is the most touching part of his story, I think, and the part that really shatters the Johnny Rotten myth for good. He met Nora Forster in the mid-70s. She was a German publishing heiress, and she was 14 years older than him.
An older woman, wealthy.
Mm.
The tabloids must have had a field day. People probably thought he was a gold digger.
I'm sure they did, but they were together for 44 years until her death. In the world of rock and roll, that is an eternity. And it wasn't just some marriage of convenience. They took in Nora's grandchildren, the twin sons of Ari, up from the punk band The Slits, because Ari couldn't cope at the time.
So Lydon, the man who sang about abortion and anarchy, became a grandfather figure raising teenage boys.
He said, "They gave us hell, but I loved having kids around." That domesticity is so profoundly unexpected. But the real test of their bond came in the later years. Nora developed Alzheimer's.
And Lydon became her full-time carer.
He refused to put her in a care home. He said, "I made a commitment." He spoke about it in interviews with such tenderness and love. He said, "The real person is still there. A bit of love goes a long way." He dedicated his entire life in those final years to making her comfortable, to keeping her memories alive as best he could.
This all culminated in 2023, with Peel's attempt to enter the Eurovision Song Contest for Ireland.
Yes, they submitted a song called Hawaii. And it wasn't a punk anthem. It wasn't angry or political. It was a gentle, beautiful, heartbreaking love song dedicated to Nora. It was about a happy memory they shared on holiday in Hawaii, and it was his attempt to capture that one perfect memory for her before it faded away completely.
It didn't win the selection process, but I don't think that was ever the point. It was this incredibly public declaration of love from a man who spent his life sneering at sentimentality.
It showed a vulnerability that we had never ever seen from him before. Nora passed away in April 2023, and he was, by all accounts, completely devastated. It showed that underneath all that armor he built in that hospital ward at age 7, there was a massive and ultimately very human heart.
And we should also mention his best friend, his closest confidant, John Rambo Stevens.
Rambo, his childhood friend from Finsbury Park. He was Lydon's manager, his minder, his head of security for over 50 years. That loyalty to his wife for over 4 decades, to his childhood friend for over 5 sets, it stands in such stark contrast to the betrayal and chaos narrative of the Sex Pistols. He keeps his circle very tight and he protects them fiercely.
So let's try to synthesize all of this. We started with the paradox. The anarchist butter salesman. The punk who loves the Queen. The Trump supporter who became a citizen for Obama. But after unpacking it all, does it start to make a strange kind of sense?
I think it does. Lydon's entire career is defined by uncomfortable truths. He called out Jimmy Savile when it was professionally dangerous to do so. He criticized the punk movement while he was leading it because he saw it becoming just another uniform. He supported political figures that alienated his original fan base because he values shaking things up over any kind of ideological purity.
He is a contrarian, but a principled one. His one principle seems to be that he refuses to be owned by a record label, by a political party, or even by his own fans' expectations of who Johnny Rotten should be.
Exactly. He realized early on, probably back in that hospital bed at age 7, that the world is chaotic and often unfair. So you might as well construct your own reality, defend the few people you love with everything you have, and never ever let them tell you who you are supposed to be.
Lydon once famously said, "It's fun being scum." But looking at his life, the whistleblowing, the caregiving, the artistic integrity, the fierce loyalty, I have to wonder, was the scum label just a mirror he held up to society to show them their own prejudices?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? If he is rotten, then what does that make the society that created him and then condemned him for telling the truth?
On that provocative thought, we're going to wrap up. If you want to understand the man yourself, don't just look at the pictures in the history books. Listen to Metalbox. Read his book, No Irish, No Blacks, No Dogs. Decide for yourself.
Just don't expect him to care what you decide.
Huh. Very true. Thanks for diving in with us. We'll see you on the next one.